Hey, what's going on, you guys? I'm just going to wait a second or two, get some people in here, and then we'll kind of rock and roll. And so for the subject today, I was actually supposed to have like another client on, but we rescheduled last minute to next week. So next week, I'll be interviewing another client about his transformation. But today, I wanted to talk about just natural ways of really taking care of your skin and kind of having good anti-aging practices. Edwin, good to see you. Having good anti-aging practices. So personally, like I don't use any face wash or any body wash or any kind of like medication or ointments on my skin or any of that sort. Chad, good to see you. Hey Chad, good to see you. Hope all is well. Edwin as well, and whoever else is in here. I see a few more people popped in. So we'll be talking about how to establish that kind of natural glow. I'm sure there are many people that have way better skin than I do. This is just kind of like what I use for myself personally. And again, I kind of stay away from using any type of like face wash or face ointments or any of that stuff or whatever else is out in the market or antibiotics for acne or any of that sort. So I'm just going to go down the list of what works for me, and it might work for some people, it might not, but this is just like what I do personally for myself and what I've been doing for probably well over 2 decades at this point. So yeah, let's go down the list. We're going to start off with the easy stuff first, and then we'll go into kind of like the tougher stuff, but I feel the stuff that's actually more impactful and would produce a lot better results. So one of the easiest things like you can do or anyone can do to optimize like their skin complexion and their overall health is just get in a habit of sleeping between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. So remember, your body is kind of biologically primed to function around the rhythms of the sun. So generally speaking, your body repairs itself physically from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. and mentally from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. So one of the best things like I found to do is just, and it really depends on your personality and temperament and stuff of that sort and what you have going on, is usually be in bed actually by around like 9 p.m. Mark, good to see you, is usually be in bed by around 9 p.m. So that way you have enough time to wind down and actually already be sleeping by 10 p.m. and then adequately wake up around 6 a.m. Because one of the problems of, for example, going to sleep at, like actually going to bed at 10 p.m. is it usually takes you a little bit of time to wind down. Some people obviously a little bit more than others, depending on their personality and whatever else they have going on in their life. But what ends up happening is like, for example, the person in their mind will be thinking like, oh, I am going to sleep at 10 p.m. And that's true. They are in bed by 10 p.m., but they're actually falling asleep by 11 p.m. So if you average this out throughout the week, they're actually losing about 7 hours of physical repair time per week every single week, and then multiply that by 4 weeks in a month and then 12 months in a year. It ends up being like quite a bit of lost time, which kind of fatigues you and drags down your central nervous system. Quality sleep, honestly, it's one of the best things you could do for your health, and it's low tech. Anyone can do it. You don't need anything special outside of just a really good bedtime ritual and good lifestyle habits as well to optimize that sleep. And that alone would not only improve your health overall, but your skin complexion, because you won't look so tired and haggard and just so aged. Because remember, poor sleeping patterns or poor sleeping hygiene really increase the aging of the systemic aging of your whole entire body as a whole, and will obviously make you look a lot older than your actual biological age. Alvin, good to see you. So that's one easy thing that anyone can implement. Just if you're looking to go to sleep at 10 p.m., actually already be asleep by 10 p.m., be in bed by 9 p.m. I usually have like an Edison light on or something like that. Edison light is one of those like very dim lights. I would recommend that instead of like fluorescent overhead lights like you see at the doctor's office or any office or stuff of that sort. And then just slowly kind of wind down for the day and make sure you're already thoroughly relaxed by the time 10 p.m. hits around. One other thing I do is I lay in bed at 9 p.m., kind of read a book, and when 9:50, let's say 9:50, 9:55 p.m. hits, I actually go to the bathroom really quick and just pee and then go to sleep. That way you kind of decrease your chance of having to get up in the middle of the night and have that interrupted sleep as well. So that's huge, and that can do wonders not only for your health systemically, but also for your skin complexion. It actually does quite a bit in terms of helping decrease aging and all those lines and wrinkles and all that stuff. So another huge thing is just taking a quick, that I found very helpful for myself, is just taking a quick 20-minute midday nap. Not every day, and I don't need it all the time. Usually, like, I either do like a meditation session or a nap, for example. If it is a nap, midday, I'll just turn my phone on airplane mode and basically just kind of lay there with my eyes closed and try to basically progressively relax my body. So if I feel any tension anywhere, I just try to focus specifically on that tension and try to kind of progressively relax it until that tension disappears. So everyone is different and everyone holds stress and tension differently in their body. For me personally, it's in the traps and also the hamstrings. So I try to kind of progressively relax those areas until they're completely relaxed. And that's huge. And once again, like a very low-tech option that anyone can implement, and it'll actually give you a lot of energy as well. So some of you having those midday crashes, if you do take that nap midday, you'll notice for the second half of the day, you're actually full of energy and a lot more positive as well. And remember, as you're more energetic, you deal with stress a lot better, because if you're in a state of fatigue, always stress, your perception of stress is amplified. So let's say you're very well rested, a stress that's a 2 out of 10 will be perceived as a 2 out of 10, or maybe as a 1 out of 10, or maybe not stressful at all. But if you're very chronically fatigued and going off very poor sleep, like a stress, objectively speaking, although stress is very subjective, a stress of 2 out of 10 will actually be perceived as like a 4 or 5 out of 10, or even higher at times. So it kind of amplifies your perception of stress a lot more, which in a sense sets up an insidious cycle where you have this state of chronic low-grade chronic stress, which we'll talk about a lot more later on in this video. So that's another quick thing you can do as well. That's very low tech, okay? So another good tip that I found is actually eating 4 to 6 cups of organic and well-sourced vegetables daily. And I try to pick at least the organic options at the grocery store, although chances are, they come from industrially organic operations, so a lot of monocropping. So they might not be as nutrient dense as from a biodynamic farm. But the good thing is the USDA organic program is very good at actually keeping synthetic pesticides off of the crops, okay? So that's one plus side, is you actually decrease the amount of synthetic herbicides, fungicides, pesticides, or whatever else you're exposed to on a daily basis. So obviously decreasing that toxic load in your body will have like a positive effect not only on your health and your immune system, but also your skin complexion as well. And getting all those rich phytonutrients from the vegetables is also great as well. I always try to mix up the colors also. So for example, with carrots, there are a whole bunch of different colors, like purple, yellow, orange, red. And I try to have an abundance of them, so you're getting an abundance of phytonutrients in your diet. Obviously, if you want to maximize your phytonutrient intake, you would need blood work done or a GI map test done, and then you can determine from that testing if you're deficient on any specific vitamin or mineral, and then you can kind of supplement that into your diet. Like last time I had a GI map test done, I showed that I was deficient in a phytonutrient that's available through white mushrooms. So I just threw that into my diet, and I'm able to customize my diet that way. And it's pretty cool, and I would highly recommend, if you guys haven't done that, just to get it done, to give you a good blueprint of how your body is doing, okay? Miguel, good to see you. Alvin as well. Mark, good to see you guys. So obviously, like, I try to go for organic crops, and I covered this in a lot in various other videos and podcasts, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but you generally want to source, George, good to see you. You generally want to source organic vegetables from like biodynamic or diverse farming practices, because the one problem with monocropping is monocropping, meaning when they grow a single crop over acre and acre and acre and acre, is that they tend to be a lot lower in nutrients. And also like the crops at the supermarket tend to be a lot lower in nutrients for a couple of different reasons. One of the reasons, for example, they pick the crops before they ripen. So George, good to see you. Let me know what's new. They pick the crops before they ripen. So that way they ripen on the way to the store and they look very fresh on display, which will obviously increase the chances of you buying that crop. The only problem is the ripening process is how the plant uptakes its nutrition from the soil. So if they pick it before it's ripened, obviously it's going to be a lot lower in phytonutrients. And if they're also growing it on soil that's deficient in nutrients, such as soil that will be present in a monocrop environment, which a lot of these grocery stores source from, that's also going to lower the nutritional profile as well. And then the transportation cost, the age of the crop, just like with meat, the second the animal is killed, the nutritional profile gets lower and lower until it eventually rots and actually becomes poisonous for you if you eat that product. It's kind of the same exact thing with crops. As you pick it from the soil, it lowers in quality day by day. And a lot of times, some of the produce on display could be a couple of weeks old already. And then they sit there on display for a couple of days. Then you purchase that crop, then they probably sit in your refrigerator or your counter for a couple more days. So obviously by the time you're eating it, you're basically getting just like empty water, empty calories, and not the nutritional profile or the nutrients you probably get, not probably, most definitely would get from a wild crop variation. Like for example, if you found an apple on a tree and you picked it from that tree and ate it right on the spot, the nutritional profile of that apple would be exponentially higher than an apple that you would find at a grocery store, okay? And it adds up, if you're eating this stuff year after year, et cetera, it's gonna play a big part. Justin, good to see you in your health and your overall complexion. Remember, the more phytonutrients and the better your digestive system is at supporting these phytonutrients, the better your skin complexion will look, okay? So it all adds up. Then there's often always like the genetic breeding or selection of these crops. So for example, as a simple example I use in a lot of my podcasts, because a lot of people could relate to it, look at the carrot. A lot of people think the carrot is naturally orange, but it's not the case. The carrot started as like a gray root in Afghanistan, and over hundreds of years of genetic selection, it made its way to India where it became red. And then hundreds of years later, it made its way to, India where it became purple. And then hundreds of years later, it made its way to China where it became red. Then hundreds of years later, it made its way through selective breeding to Turkey, I believe, where it became yellow. And then it made its way to Netherlands or Denmark or someplace like that, and it became orange there. So you can see it's had a lot of genetic selection and a lot of genetic breeding over the years. And what ends up happening is when this selection happens, usually the farmer selects to make the crop sweeter and have thinner skin. But as you increase the sugar content of the crop through this selective breeding, which is more appetizing for the consumer, so easier to sell, no doubt, you dramatically, in this carrot's case, you dramatically decrease so the phytonutrient referred to as anthocyanins, which are very potent anti-cancer agent in the crop. So like for example, a purple carrot has like around 900% more anthocyanins than an orange carrot, where an orange carrot almost has almost zero anthocyanins, just to give you one quick comparison. But this has happened throughout the genetic breeding of basically almost everything you see at the grocery store. Everything you see at the grocery store is a very, very far distant cry from where it came from its wild ancestors, which were very nutritionally dense. Just the only problem is the wild crops tend to be a bit more bitter, so they're not as marketable, but a little bit more bitter and a little bit thicker skin. But however, they're much, much higher in phytonutrients, like super through the roof high, okay? It makes a huge difference because look, you guys, this is all these little things, they might seem little and insignificant, but they're actually very important. And if you look at the state of American health these days, it's pretty terrible. I mean, it's if I can give it a lower than F- rating, I would give it a lower than F- rating, because literally anywhere you go outside these days in America, 9 out of 10 people you run into are are full of obesity and disease, full of mental and physical pain and clinical levels of it, not even just minor annoyances. I mean, it's very, very hard to run into like a very healthy individual in America these days, okay? So a lot of this stuff does play a big role and should not be negated or should not be kind of seen as like, oh, it's like a little bonus and it's okay if I skip it and this and that, I'll be fine. Most likely you won't, okay? Especially when you start comparing yourself to the standards of hunter-gatherers, which if you take out child mortality, I mean, you could look at this up at any Google search because there's a big misconception here. If you take out child mortality, they lived into fairly old age, 50s, 60s, 70s, in full health, okay? Without pretty much any of the health problems we're experiencing today, like pretty much none, okay? And they're very, very physically fit, able to hunt huge game animals without even rifles or weapons. They just had like spears, like the Neanderthal would even run up to the animal and stab them with these spears. And the game was like huge mammoths and very, very dangerous animals. And they had the vitality and the fitness to be able to kind of conquer these beasts of nature and survive in those elements. Okay? And what were they eating? Obviously, they're living a way different, better life, in my opinion. But what were they eating? You know, they're eating wild game, wild fish, and drinking pretty much just fresh water. That's it, you know, and also picking wild crops. And look, man, they're in very, very good shape. They don't have personal trainers, a 401k plan, a Bally's membership, health insurance, none of that stuff. They're just in great shape all the time. And I guarantee you suffered from a small, invisible fraction of the amount of mental illness that a typical society would suffer from. As society today has become basically like a swamp of like mental and physical pathology. And all of the health fields are just kind of stuck in these loops of managing these symptoms, just managing symptoms and living in this swamp themselves and trying to figure out very elaborate ways of how to survive in this swamp of mental and physical pathology instead of doing the smart thing and just getting out of the swamp, okay, and letting your body heal itself. So I have a question here. Alvin, does distilled water have health benefits? Alvin, I'm actually going to go into water today. So, and I can go into it right now to kind of answer your question in a little bit more detail. So, Alvin is asking if distilled water has any health benefits. And my answer is there's a place and time for everything. I personally would consistently stay away from distilled water and water treated with reverse osmosis, or just generally any type of water that's very, very heavily filtered. And this is kind of like a tough balance because unfortunately these days, as you guys know, and I mentioned in various other lives, you know, the average newborn in America is born with trace amounts of 200 different chemicals in their body already. Okay, so there's a huge amount of toxic load in the average American's body, which obviously is reflective of the poor health of the country. I mean, look, you guys, 1 out of every 2 Americans now develop cancer in their lifetime, and half of those that develop cancer die from it. So basically every 4th person you know is going to die from cancer in their lifetime. And although not directly related to toxic load, but 1 out of every 3 people you know is going to die from a heart attack in their lifetime, which is pretty crazy. And not even taking into consideration the amount of people that die from diabetes every year, which is about 100,000 from properly prescribed pharmaceutical drugs, which is about 130,000 deaths per year. Also the whole entire COVID situation, which mainly just affected like very overweight individuals that had various other health issues as well. About 75% of the people requiring a hospitalization through COVID were obese and had 2 to 3 different or more different health issues already, etc., etc. So with water, I personally drink either artesian water or just generally hard water. So you got soft water, which is kind of like distilled water, for example, or you have hard water, which comes from an underground source of some sort, or maybe even at a surface water lake as well. So for example, in my area, one thing you could do, Alvin, is you can contact your local, whoever supplies your local water utility company. And they're required to post water toxology or just a water report on their website or mail you a copy for free. And you will see if you have hard water or soft water in your area and the level of pollutants in your area as well. So that way you can, if you're concerned about that, you can take that test or those results to your local water like a Home Depot or whoever sells water filters, and show them what you need to filter out in your local area, and they'll give you a good water filtration system for that. I personally use a Berkey. I've had the water tested from there as well. Like, one stat that anyone can relate to is I tested the chlorine content out of the faucet in my area, and it came in at, like, I forget exactly, but 2 or 3 or 4 parts per million. And then I tested after running it through a Berkey filtered system, and it came in at 0.001 parts per million. So it pretty much eliminated it. But you're not going to, unfortunately, these days, because of the amount of industry and pollution in the world, you're not going to 100% get rid of any pollutants. So kind of keep that in mind, okay? Try to be realistic with that as well, but you can do a lot of great work from that. So personally, I would aim for hard water to answer your question. Hard water has basically the general stats are like a pH of 7.5 to 8, total dissolved solids of about 300 part per million, and a hardness level of about 120 parts per million. And you can buy these test kits fairly inexpensively on Amazon for the most part, or pretty much anywhere online. You would need like a pH tester, total dissolved solids tester, and a hardness tester. And all three of those might cost you like $30, $40. So it's not too bad, and it's cool. You can kind of tinker with your water, and thus you can be more consciously aware of what's going into your body. And it's a cool way to educate yourself and stuff of that sort. So I love doing that stuff. It's definitely not for everyone. You could just go to that water utility company and ask them for their report, and you should have it in there as well. They usually do it seasonally because the water quality changes depending on season and stuff of that sort. So spring water from a local supermarket. Spring water from a local supermarket is totally okay. I just try to stay away from plastic bottles. That's the main thing, okay? Because you don't want any of those kind of like plastic chemicals, especially you have to take into consideration they're being transported in a truck. The truck is probably pretty hot in a lot of areas. So, that plastic heats up and gets into the water. And then if you're physically active, I mean, you're drinking like 3 to 4 liters of water a day, and that could add up to quite a bit of increased in toxic load in your body throughout your lifetime. So that's what I would try to do. I always try to drink out of glass. I actually have a glass bottle way over there, and try to avoid plastics all the time, okay? So water is obviously very important as well, guys, because your cells are like 99+% water, and your cells set the foundation to the function of your entire body. So obviously, if you're not functioning properly at the cellular level, that's going to have a ripple effect on your entire well-being. And just drinking water is also good to keep that skin looking, fresh and young. And it also is a great way to detoxify your body. Aesthetically is great for getting your skin to look thinner, and also your body will retain less water as well once you start drinking more water on a consistent basis and have the right diet to match for that. Because as you guys know, I mean, your skull is embedded, your brain is embedded in your skull. And your brain uses its 5 human senses to kind of gather information from the outside world, in one way or another try to increase your chances of survival, okay? Because that's the main goal from a biological perspective, just getting the genes to survive and kind of move on to the next generation, et cetera, et cetera. So it doesn't actually like see the outside world. So if you have a habit of drinking a lot of water one day, not the next, et cetera, your body will think oftentimes you're stuck in some forest or something. Because remember, the human DNA hasn't really changed pretty much at all since 10,000 years ago. So your mind still thinks it's like a hunter-gatherer running around in caves and hunting whatever, in the forest. So it'll think like, hey, I'm not getting water in consistently. this person must be in some dried out place, okay? In some place without a water source. So what I'm going to do to make sure his chances of survival increases is start retaining water. I'll start retaining water, and on top of that, I'll trick the person into believing he's actually hungry as well, because I don't think he's going to get any liquid source of water, for example. But if I trick him into believing that he's hungry, he's going to possibly go eat more food, okay? And obviously a lot of food, like vegetables are like 95% water, meat's like 70, 60% water. You get a lot of water from those sources, so you eat. So a lot of times it goes into, a lot of times people think they're hungry, where in reality they're just thirsty, and their body's just tricking, or their mind is just tricking their body into believing they're hungry so that they can acquire that water, which is the most important nutrient out of all the nutrients, from a different food source, because it doesn't think it's getting it from a liquid like actual water. Okay, so that's just another way to manage hunger levels effectively, okay, without getting excess calories. And that's why people overeat and they still feel hungrier and hungrier, because they're not drinking adequate water. They're mainly drinking like soda, energy drinks, mainly coffee, which dehydrates you even more. And then they go eat junk food that's devoid of any nutrients, and obviously don't feel full on that. Like, for example, go ahead and try eating 2 chicken breasts. I forgot the exact calorie content of a chicken breast. I think it's like 400 calories or something. Go ahead and eat 1 chicken breast and like 2 cups of broccoli, which basically is 0 calories for the broccoli, for example. It's very difficult, and it's actually very filling, especially if you have, let's say, like 16 ounces or 20 ounces of water with that food intake. And you're not putting any sauces or anything. You just put like black pepper on the chicken breast or stuff of that sort. And all of a sudden you're very full, and you stay full for quite a while, especially if you're staying hydrated throughout the day. But you go eat like a McDonald's cheeseburger, which is, I don't know, like 600, 700 calories or something of that sort. And you're pretty much like hungry, I don't know, like an hour later or 2 hours later. It's been a long time since I've eaten it personally myself. But when I do from time to time, it's kind of like you eat it and then you're hungry almost instantly. And this is how people become like very overweight very quickly, while ironically still being hungry, So something to think about. So Alvin, I kind of go on tangents. Definitely let me know if I answered your question. That's what I would aim for. I love my Berkey water system. I have the carbon filter, 2 of them, and also an arsenic and a fluoride filter as well. They sell a couple different filtered units, and I run them through all those filters. And in my area, there's hard water already, and I tested after the filtration. It stays pretty hard as well. And hard water is ideal for drinking, for my goals and everything. So I stay away from soft water. But from time to time, nothing's wrong with it, Also for emergency situations, it is great to have distilled water, but bottled up and not open, because it pretty much lasts for forever. So one cool thing for emergency situations you guys can do is I'd buy like 5 of those 5-gallon containers, fill them up with distilled water, make sure it's thoroughly closed, and just store it in a very cool area. That way, in case there's some kind of emergency or anything, you have a good like 20 gallons or 25 gallons or so of drinkable water that can last you for a little bit and help you, That way you're not running around in an emergency trying to find water and stuff of that sort. So, okay, so we covered that. 2 cups of vegetables, or 4 to 6 cups of vegetables, good sleep. I try to minimize the fruit intake. I do have organic fruit, but I try to stick to just 1 or 2 pieces a day because of the high sugar intake, okay? I try to obviously keep I don't have any artificial sugars or anything of that sort. Any sugar I get is just from natural sources such as fruit. But I still keep it on the low end. I try to manage my fruit intake, and also, unless you're, Michael, good to see you, unless you're like very, very physically active, it's just a general good idea to keep your sugar intake very low, and it might be a good idea even if you're physically active as well. So some other easy things that you can do, I actually haven't done this in a little while, is go to the steam room once a week. The steam room is amazing, especially when you combine it with all this stuff we mentioned for really clearing up your skin and creating that picture perfect skin, okay? Sleep is going to be obviously the big thing, because if that kind of sucks, you'll just always look haggard and tired and very old. So make sure you're mastering that, but all these other things play into the variable as well, and just really kind of create that natural glow and decrease the wrinkles and that kind of aged appearance, okay? So steam room is huge. I used to just do it once a week, nothing too crazy. I built up a tolerance, but I would be able to stay in there for like 20, 30 minutes or so. Everyone has their different routines. Some people use saunas, which are great as well. Some people use those infrared beds. I don't know how well those work. I personally never used those, but I liked the steam room better than the sauna, because the steam room still maintained that moisture and that plumpness in your skin, where the sauna, I felt, just really dried me out and kind of created that kind of very kind of fatigued look to the face, like it kind of dried you out and sucked all the moisture out of your skin and stuff of that sort. So just some advantages and disadvantages of the sauna and the steam room. Okay, so meats, I try to have just like, I try to stay away from factory farm meats basically, because you get like a very high omega-6 to omega-3 ratio in factory farmed meats. I talked about this extensively in so many other videos, so I'm not going to go into it in crazy amounts here. I do talk about it a lot in my second book, so you guys are welcome to check it out there, Anti-Factory Farm Shopping Guide on Amazon. Also, I've been a guest, lucky to be invited to be a guest on various podcasts. And you guys can check out those episodes where I give away literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars of free nutrition information, because it's a passion project of mine, and I just really like helping people source higher quality food, which is a very big challenge in the US these days. But generally, I like to source pasture-raised meats that are fed a species-specific diet. Wild fish, don't eat fish too much, although it's great for you. I don't find it like it tastes that great, or maybe I haven't found a way to cook it well. So I mainly stick to kind of like the land animals, but it's totally up to the individual. I just try to make sure if they are land animals, they're pasture raised and they're fed a species specific diet that's not high in grains. That's huge. So make sure the label doesn't say vegetarian fed, because that's obviously not a good thing. And wild fish, obviously any kind of wild animal is going to be A+ food category already, because at the end of the day, no farmer, no matter how good they are, is going to match the ability of nature to farm, which has been doing it for 4 to 5 billion years already, and has mastered the art of producing very nutritionally dense food. So catching an animal in the wild, like for example elk or something like that, will always be a superior food group to pretty much like literally anything you find at the grocery store, almost 100% guaranteed. The good thing is wild fish is wild. So you have that, and you don't need to go hunting, unlike for the other things, you might need to go hunting or find a hunter that's willing to sell you what they hunt, etc., etc. Wild fish is also an amazing, amazing, amazing source of nutrition, and an amazing source of omega-3s, which are super important for a myriad of functions in your health, including creating good skin complexion. Okay, so omega-3s. You could get it from a supplement, but I would highly recommend getting it from a whole food source and not relying on the supplement solely. Okay. In terms of supplements, a great company is Nordic Naturals. Nordic Naturals, it's been a little while since I bought an omega-3 supplement, but I think Designs for Health, credible supplement companies, Nordic Naturals, Designs for Health, Poliquin Group, Dr. Myers as well. ATP Science also has a bunch of great products as well. So those are just some great companies. You got to be careful with supplements, guys, because remember, if they're sourcing raw ingredients that aren't coming from a good source, whatever chemicals they use to grow those raw ingredients, make it as a concentrate in that supplement, which then you have probably 2 or 3 pills of that every single day. And it adds up, okay? It adds up to a high toxic load. And remember, Don't take it lightly. I swear, don't take it lightly. But 1 out of every 2 Americans develops cancer in their lifetime. That's 50%. And half of those die from it. So that's 25% of Americans die from cancer within their lifetime. And when I tell people that, they always take it lightly. They're always like, oh, it's not going to be me. But yet those same people play the lottery. It's like 1 in a billion chance of winning and still somehow think they're going to win. But when I tell them they have a 50% chance of developing cancer because their lifestyle and nutritional choices suck, oh, that's not going to happen to me. Try to use your brain a little bit, okay? All right, so here's the big thing. So those are the easy things that could build great skin complexion and skin tone. Those are the easy things I think everyone should be doing, okay? Because it's definitely manageable. And before someone says, oh, pasture-raised meats are too expensive and this and that, well, wait a minute. The average American spends $8,000 to $16,000 a year on non-essential expenses that's keeping them obese, full of misery and disease. $8,000 to $16,000. A 2,000 calorie USDA organic diet per year costs about $4,000 a year. 2,000 calories, at least USDA supermarket level organic diet, $4,000 a year. Versus the average American spends $8,000 to $16,000 a year on keeping themselves obese, miserable, and full of disease, mainly because they're using this non-essential expense spending as a distraction to a miserable life that they don't like, okay? So I see a lot of people, they hate their job, they try to travel a lot more, and they spend a lot of money on that, just 2 weeks later return back to their job. And I'm like, wait a minute, like if you hate your job, why don't you create a cool job that you feel you don't have to run away from as often? That would make way more sense, you know? And stuff of that sort. Or they kind of drink themselves away on the weekend, or they kind of suffocate themselves emotionally with poor eating choices, fast food, because unlike the real world where they don't have, where they feel, this is important, where they feel like they don't have power, and they're not loved for who they are, so they have to pretend to be someone they're not to be accepted in the workplace, like pretend they like their boss when they really don't, or pretend they like their coworkers when they really don't, or pretend they enjoy their work and they want to do it when they really don't, but they're just doing it for a paycheck. All this creates a lot of tension and uneasiness in the central nervous system, and it leads a person to seek out comfort and distractions. Comfort in the sense of food, because it accepts you and it loves you for who you are, and you have control over it, unlike perceiving the real world where you don't have control, et cetera, and they kind of drown themselves in these distractions all year round. And their physique and their body and their symptoms are all, signs of a lot of mental and physical pain in the person's life, stuff of that sort. I would even argue that a person, genuinely cannot optimize their happiness when they're overweight, because that overweightness or that fatness is a byproduct of a lot of mental and physical pain in their life. So it's one and the other, okay? So they are spending the money. They're spending way more money on being unhealthy than they would on being healthy and not living life unconsciously, okay? So it might seem harsh, but I hope that message wakes a few people up, so they're not running around in circles and chasing symptoms all their life. And you're not a 401k client to your doctor, okay? Because you keep coming back sicker and sicker year after year. And they're putting you on their 401k plan to help fund their kids' education off of your sickness and poor lifestyle, which are driven for the most part by your poor lifestyle and nutritional choices, your choices of what you decide to do every day. And they're driven, it's your fault, okay? It's your fault, and that's totally okay. Because if you're doing it to yourself, you could also stop doing it to yourself, okay? And that's pretty powerful. And you can start by stopping today, whatever you're doing, if you are doing it. So one of the biggest things, and I touched on it by that statement, one of the biggest things a person can do to really optimize their complexion is decrease their incidence of chronic low stress basically throughout their entire life or day. And a lot of people don't think this is a big deal, because it's kind of been normalized, especially in American culture, of if you're not doing your job, if you're not dying for your job, you're not doing your job type of mentality, which has led to an obesity epidemic and just like a health epidemic in the US in general, I used to do a lot of corporate lectures, and I pretty much never run into any healthy people in the corporate environment. It's literally like almost zero. It's literally zero. I would even argue it's pretty much zero, especially that culture, which tends to be very pathological on various levels. I can go into many, many hours of how unnatural that environment is. Let me get rid of this. Many, many hours of how unnatural and pathological that environment is on many different levels, and how stressful it is for a typical person to work there. So low-grade chronic stress is huge. There's a really good book you guys can check out called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, Adrenal Fatigue, 21st Century Syndrome, or something of that sort. But the general idea, there's a lot we can go into this, but the general idea is the human central nervous system hasn't evolved to deal with low-grade chronic stress very well. And although it doesn't seem damaging, it's actually like extremely, extremely damaging, in the sense that, let's look at how hunter-gatherers lived way back in the day, okay? So they're obviously sleeping with the rhythm of the sun, like we talked about the importance here, okay? Because they didn't have an electricity and stuff of that sort. So once the sun went down, I mean, it's literally pitch black. I don't know if you guys have ever been stuck in a forest without a flashlight or anything, but you literally can't even see like 1 foot ahead of you unless the moon is out and very, very bright. It's basically like impossible to see. So you have to shelter in and just go to sleep and just wake up in the morning and proceed throughout your day there. So their sleeping cycles were perfect. Okay. On top of that, the way their central nervous system was tasked was completely different. So for example, you go on a hunt, let's say you hunt like a big mammoth with your tribe. John, good to see you. Michael, Isan, good to see you guys. Michael as well. You would hunt with your tribe, you would kill this animal, and obviously it would be very stressful because the animal is huge and dangerous and stuff of that sort. Maybe one of your tribesmen or ladies gets killed, because in Neanderthal societies, the women hunted and were equal with the men, unlike in the Homo sapiens society, where the women tend to be domesticated for the most part. So it would be stressful. You know, maybe one guy would get killed. Obviously, this would be extremely taxing. But hey, you know, after you kill this huge mammoth, let's say it's during the winter, you can store it. You have enough food for forever, okay, for quite a while. And usually nothing happens in between this time. I mean, the tribesmen they're nomadic, you know, so they're moving around, but they're surrounded by nature and forest 24/7. They're once again eating wild game, wild fish, water, like drinking out of a spring, all that stuff. And they're just hanging out. They're enjoying, they're having really good sleep. They're getting a lot of great natural sunlight exposure. They're not exposed to like electronics all day. Their posture and biomechanics is great, because basically they have that ideal low-grade intensity movement, low-grade dynamic movement throughout the day, which helps optimize your joint health and all that stuff, etc., and stuff of that sort. And then 3 months rolls around, and they get in another big hunt, which might be stressful. You know, the adrenaline might start pumping really quick. And then again, nothing happens for 3 months. But today, it's completely different. Today, you might not have, well, actually, in like a corporate environment, for example, you do have those stressful events, like high stress. Let's say we'll define high as like a 6 out of 10 or higher. So a lot of times, just the work environment is at that level every single day. But even if it's not, the most common scenario is you have like a 2 or 3, which is that low-grade chronic stress that I was describing, on blast 7 days a week, followed by, you know, 1 day a week or 2 days a week of that 6 or 7. You know, so it's the worst combination, because you have that low-grade chronic stress, which the central nervous system hasn't evolved well to deal with. It's basically, in the medical community or in the health community, defined as like the new smoking. You know, smoking is obviously seen as bad these days for your health, but so is that low-grade chronic stress starting to be seen as the new smoking, in the sense that it's that detrimental to your health. And low-grade chronic stress can take on many variables. I mean, it could be like the annoyance of your coworker. Maybe there's a disconnect between how your boss manages and how you like to be managed, or what kind of projects you're working on. Definitely being in traffic is, once again, replicating that low-grade chronic stress. Bill here, bill there, coffee here, living off coffee there, having highly inflammatory foods is also stressful on the body, such as like factory farm meats or fast food or any kind of like highly processed food, which is very, very high in omega-6. Marital problems, financial problems, traveling, if you're kind of flying from state to state or different time zones, it's very draining on the body and stressful on the body as well. Being in like very crowded areas, being disconnected from nature. I mean, you can see it's adding up. You know, I can go on for a couple of hours here. But that's kind of the low-grade chronic stress the average person is living on. And my best advice is the more of those low-grade chronic stresses you eliminate, the more your health will improve. And the more your health and immune system improves, the better skin complexion you will have and the less aged or haggard you would look. Because your body is just not being taxed as much, okay? Because that low-grade chronic stress is very taxing on the central nervous system. It kind of brings your immune system down. And so one important thing, since it's the weekend basically, one cool thing you guys can do is just write down like all of the stresses you have in your life. Right now, just spend, you know, today, Saturday, and Sunday, jotting down that long list. And it should be pretty hefty because a lot of you will have a pretty long list. And you can jot them down in categories like low, medium, and high stress, you know, like 3 different categories, and start writing them down. One thing I like to do is, for example, I'm just going to do it here. So you go like this, you would circle, okay, you would write stress, load, and then you just write a bunch of arrows. Oh, I'm kind of running out of ink here. But you would just write a bunch of arrows in all the events that are stressing you out. I mean, it could be the most minor. Like even, for example, even having something like a physique that you're not happy about, you know, like unwanted weight, like a belly sticking out of your shirt or something like that, that causes you to be self-conscious in social situations and causes you a little bit of anxiety. That could be categorized as the low-grade chronic stress category, you know, so you would write that in. Say your boss, you would write that in. Traffic, you know, you would write that in. And just kind of see how many of these are going on in your life, okay? And see if you could eliminate some unessential ones. And I'm pretty sure a lot of you can right off the bat if you really gave it some thought. And don't be defeated. Don't be like, oh, you know, this is too hard. Well, look, it might be hard creating some change sometimes, but hey, it's hard to stay obese, full of disease and misery your whole entire life too, you know? So choose what kind of hard you want in your life. I'd rather, you know, the other hard versus being obese, miserable, and full of disease. So that's a cool thing you guys can do. And honestly, that's really the main thing. I mean, if you can master that, which is going to be really tough for a lot of you to do, you will see a dramatic improvement in your skin complexion and your overall quality of life and health. So my situation is extreme. Although anyone can do it if they want to, I did it, okay? So trust me, anyone can do it. I went down to like 2 days a week of work remotely, okay? And which dramatically improved the quality of my life because I was able to have a lot more balance in my day-to-day life as well. So I spent 2 days a week working remotely, helping clients with their goals, then 2 days a week continued education, which I love to do, then 3 days a week focusing on activities that kind of keep me balanced in life. And they vary from time to time because you need different things in different aspects of your life. So for me, personally, I'm trying to reconnect to nature a lot more these days. So I'm taking a 8-month wild animal tracking course, okay? Bill, good to see you. 8-month animal wild tracking course. So that way I don't feel like I'm leaving anything on the table and I'm getting the most out of life that I want. And obviously before you do all that, you do have to identify your core values, which I talked about in a lot of other videos, so I'm not going to cover here, but mention it in the comments and I'll try to tag you in a video that connects you to that so you can see what I mean by that. That's going to be huge because if you don't know your core values and what you're all about, you don't know what to say yes and no to. And if you don't know what to say yes or no to, you most likely are saying yes to all the wrong stuff. And some things to kind of ponder about. some symptoms that might be the result of having a disconnect in your core values are being on a bunch of pharmaceutical drugs, being very overweight, being very chronically tired, being, having anger issues, depression, anxiety, etc., all symptoms of usually a disconnection of core values coupled with a person that doesn't know how to, manage their biological system. So, all right, guys. So thank you for jumping in. That's kind of what I wanted to cover today. It's good to see you guys. John, good to see you. Hope all is well. Bill, Michael, Isan, Alvin, great question. Hope I answered it. Oscar, good to see you. Mario, great to see you as well. George, hope all is well. Miguel, I didn't even see you pop in. Good to see you. Mark, and then there are a few other people here. Edwin and a few other guys. Chad, good to see you guys. All right, guys. So have a good weekend. Try that exercise I mentioned, okay? This weekend, and see what you come up with. All right? So I'm pretty sure you guys will come up with some pretty cool stuff. Okay. All right, guys. Take care.